My name is Rich Coiro. I graduated in 2011. My job title is currently operate as a senior creative strategist at Snapchat. Sure. So I operate under the creative strategy team, which it falls under our sales org. Creative strategy's goal is to help advertisers and empower advertisers to create best-in-class advertisements using the technology on Snapchat. That includes everything from video to augmented reality to tools within our camera like filters. So really just educating the advertising base on understanding the best way to reach their desired consumer on our platform. So yeah, if you would have told me back in 2011 that in 2017 I'd be a creative strategist at Snapchat, I would not even know what that meant. I wouldn't know how to drive towards that career path. But I did know as an undergrad that I wanted to always work in consumer-facing marketing, B2C marketing. I wanted to understand how best to reach consumers. I wanted to understand the language they spoke, and I wanted to help brands define their value to them. The most, I guess, valuable aspect of driving towards my career path as such a young person was understanding what I did not like about my current job at each step of the way. I think a lot of us are looking when we first graduate to understand, to find our dream job, find the thing that really fulfills us, to find the thing that we absolutely love about our industry, our chosen industry. But I have to say that the most valuable part of defining my path was understanding what I did not like. Because then by process of elimination, I knew that I wanted to stay in advertising, but I didn't know the right way to go. So again, by understanding what I didn't like, I was then able to understand what I do and then drive towards that. I would say being interested, right? There's a wonderful quote that says to be interesting is to be interested. And I think the thing that helps me understand how to be successful in my career and be successful at the current role that I hold is to always be interested in learning someone's story, interested in understanding, how this all works, interested in just your own development. And that level of interest, it's contagious, right? Like, so once you become interested in something, that's a habit. So I always wanted to foster a level of interest in whatever it was I was doing. That passion was really fostered at St. Joe's because I'd grown up in a pretty small town in northern New Jersey. Granted, I was raised by people who were, raised in Brooklyn and Queens, New York. So I had this, this understanding that there was something greater out there. But really starting my undergraduate career in Philadelphia was a great starting place for me because the city was navigable. It had some amazing, things to offer in terms of food, in terms of culture, and that really was a part of St. Joe's as well. I met students that had come from different backgrounds than me. I met students that had spoke different languages, that were studying different things. So all of that really helped me understand the greater breadth of, what are kids my age interested in? What does a city like Philadelphia have to offer? And that really just kind of started opening my mind to thinking about what existed beyond the four walls of, my high school in that small town. Any sort of advertising club at school. I wasn't aware of one when I started. I actually didn't even know that I wanted to pursue that path just yet. But if one exists, I think learning from other kids who have interest in that field, I think will give you a good understanding of how they use it, right? I work in advertising at a platform. So each of these platforms that exist, from Twitter to Instagram to Snapchat, TikTok, these are all consumer platforms that you can use in a myriad of different ways. There's not just one way to use each of them. So I think by, being around other people that are passionate about that space will help you understand different use cases and broaden your mind to what's possible on those platforms, both in terms of consumer activity and brand activity. If you do have an interest in, creative advertising, just, you're a consumer, right? Especially in the consumer world, we're all consumers. I think a lot of marketers forget that, all of us use these tools that are serving us ads. So thinking more like a consumer, but from a brand angle was very helpful for me because I know what I like as a consumer. I know it speaks to me in terms of certain brands. So really just, I guess I'd have to boil it down to just putting yourself out there, understanding the world around you and being interested in other people. I can't really, our world in terms of social media is so nebulous in terms of, the type of content that, is developed. The language that's used on these platforms, it develops in real time. right? The word, retweet, that's a valuable metric for a brand, but what did that mean before Twitter existed? Didn't mean anything. So being interested in understanding, this living, breathing organism that is consumer advertising, I think will just arm people to understand what resonates, goals of brands, and then understanding maybe how they want to enter that world, and what role they want to play within that world, because there's so many different ways in. From my experience, the barrier that I experienced the most was just simply having a clear understanding about how my industry worked, and how you get into it, and what are the companies looking for in a really great entry level candidate. All of this information is now really readily available. Tools like LinkedIn, YouTube, places that help you understand, very macro issues on a micro level. So I would recommend to the young student just to understand, again, this is just from my experience. I can't speak for the other items in that question, but really just educating yourself on how best to enter that industry. What does it look like? Who are the players? And all of the ins and outs. Advertising has a lot of hands in the mix, and I had no idea about most of them. There are companies that are geared towards media buying, and those are the folks who are speaking with, NBC or CBS when they want to have an ad that runs in a big sporting event. There's the company that does the script writing and the production, for an advertisement. There's the brand that's briefing both of those players. There's a research company that's appending a brand study to that advertising that media company bought in order to for that brand to understand the effectiveness of their advertisement. There's so many players in that game. And that's just strictly speaking from a TV exchange. That process extrapolates when you bring it into digital media, right? Because there's so many ways to measure success. There's so many metrics. There's so many entry points. So, speaking with someone in that industry will help you understand the different ways in. And again, starting from that bottom point, how did this person's career get to this point? And, how do you navigate that? So I would say just the barrier that I experienced, it wasn't really a barrier. It was just a lack of knowledge, essentially. And now that stuff is hopefully all available on the internet, and you have access to, alumni that can help arm you with that information. So yeah, that would be my recommendation in terms of the barriers that I personally experienced. The best way to, in my opinion, in my experience, to extend their professional network as they're just graduating and just starting out, trying to find the job of their choice. I would recommend going on LinkedIn and searching for folks that work at companies that, that they're interested in. And, if there's a connective tissue there in the form of a second connection or a previous school, having the courage to reach out to them. I've had some wonderful conversations with students about, my own path, about their own desires professionally. And it's really good just to understand and have access to those people. That's one thing I wish I was a little bit more naturally interested in about when I was an undergrad, just simply because I didn't really know where I wanted to work. I knew that I had an idea, but I hadn't really formed those passion points yet. I just had a general interest. So if I could go back and not redo it, but just kind of inject another level of network building, I would have used LinkedIn a little bit more, just to, again, understand someone's path and just to see it visually, right? Mapped out on their profile page. Where did they start and now where are they? And how do they navigate that? That's very important. That also helps understand, the companies that these companies hire from, right? So let's say someone works at a company that you love, right? So where did they start? So maybe you had never heard of that company they started at, but clearly there's a path to the company that you love starting at that point, right? So it's just a wonderful way to follow some breadcrumbs and to start understanding a path that may interest you based on companies that exist in the field of interest that you may not have heard of previously. If someone wants to work at a social platform, like a Snap or a consumer-facing network like that, my recommendation is to simply use these products. Again, I wish I had a stronger interest in them when I was in undergrad, just because I would have then been able to really help define their value when I started off my career a little bit better. In terms of working with advertisers, this is what this means on Twitter, this is what this means on Facebook. Those were really the big players at the time, YouTube included. So if someone wants to come work at a consumer platform, my recommendation is to use these platforms, see how advertisers are using them and see how consumers are using them. because even though they're speaking different languages, they're speaking to each other, right? So a brand is now activating on Snapchat. They're coming with their entire set of brand language. They're speaking to you in terms that, may not make sense to the average customer because they're using their words. Customers on Snapchat are using their own specific vernacular to communicate with their friends that may not make sense to the brand, right? So how could you understand and distill those two conversations down to an understood universal set of, of language that because both people are valuable to one another, right? That brand is valuable to that consumer and that consumer is valuable to that brand. You want them on the same page. So understanding how both brands and consumers are using, consumer facing platforms, in my opinion, in my experience, will help, that student understand the role that this advertising is playing, in the overall ecosystem and how best to reach your desired consumer. And that's the best part of some of these platforms, especially if you want to work, at a creative platform, is that they're free, right? Like, these are free platforms. So you're really just, all you have to do is just sign up and then start using them and understanding the different tools, the different ways in. And, we've really lowered the barrier to entry for that, for brands and customers alike. So just taking an interest in what's happening in that space, I think would arm that student, at least for the knowledge that they need to enter that space, effectively. Yeah, I think it harkens back to what I said earlier is don't, look for a position that, you're in love with, look for a company that does something you're interested in, get into that company and figure out your path in that company, right? Based on what you like or don't like specifically about that role. None of us are going to have the job that we have forever when we first come out of college, right? Most of us will probably not be at that company for the entirety of our careers. So it's not necessarily identifying that needle in a haystack in terms of that first opportunity that, oh, I got to take this because, or I'm trying to find this job because I love the title. I'm so, obsessed with this title. I want to be a social media manager for Nike. Okay, well, you have to start somewhere, and, the social landscape is so large and there's so many players in that space, start at a company, find a company that does that work, get in there, understand how to navigate it, understand the things you don't like about it, and then figure out how to best get to that job that you do like. Because I think it's easy to kind of, enter your career and just grasp at things that you like just because everything's new and everything feels a little bit maybe unnerving and a little bit scary, for lack of better words. So you're trying to get closer to the things that make you feel good about your job. Kind of embrace the discomfort a little bit and say, hey, if this is the industry that I feel very convicted about, how could I identify the things about it that I really don't enjoy as much, as a means of process of elimination to getting towards the things that you do enjoy. I think there's a lot of pressure on young students to find that dream job because they want to tell their friends, hey, I work at this company doing X thing. There's a lot of pressure involved in that. None of that matters. It all matters about finding the path that's right for you, and that's a process. So not putting so much pressure on that first step, but looking at your career as a wide breadth and navigating it with a keen eye. That there isn't a traditional way to navigate an industry, in my opinion, especially new industries like advertising, which is ever evolving. St. Joe's making some big investments in gaming, which is a completely new landscape in terms of advertising opportunities, in terms of corporate partnerships, in terms of revenue streams. There's no traditional way, right, to your end goal. I think just being as curious as you possibly can, being true to what you like as much as possible and what makes you feel good. But again, just being very keen about understanding the things and identifying the things you don't like, I think will help arm you to be, the best professional you can and really rise to whatever level you desire. Yeah, because passion, you can't teach passion. So just approach everything with an interest and be passionate. I find that has always yielded some of the best results in my career, is to find ways to be passionate about what you're doing.